Hey, Luca.
Hey,
How's it going?
pretty good.
Good to hear, man. Um, so as we've already established, you are based in the Netherlands, but you're not Dutch. We weren't quite sure because from what we saw, we were kind of doubting. Your surname is pretty interesting. Where is that from? Casonato.
That's like three generations deep somewhere in Italy, I think.
Ah,
It's been
interesting.
passed through the family.
Yeah, because you said you were German, right? So it's also not a pretty
Yeah,
typical German name. Very
yeah,
interesting.
no, not
Cool.
really.
Um, so I'm going to get into some small talk, I guess, just so we can kind of get started and see who you are,
Sure.
how you got to where you are now. We noticed you don't have a LinkedIn, and that seems to be a pretty common thing these days. The last guy we interviewed, or the last guy we spoke to also didn't have a LinkedIn. So is there a reason for that, or are you just hiding?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't really like LinkedIn. Like if you want to view anybody on there, you need to set up an account, and they're very aggressive about
Yeah, I get that.
hiding all information of any of like everybody's information if you don't have an account in that. I don't know. I don't like the
Yeah,
site.
no, I get that. I completely get that. I get a spam every day. I get spam in languages I don't speak, so that's quite nice. Would you like a job? I don't even speak your language. Anyway, yeah. So can you tell us what got you to this point? How did you start your career in front end? Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
see. Yeah,
so
we'll get into that afterwards.
I don't know uh, when did I start? That's a good question. I don't know. I started um, with a friend at high school, and like we wanted to do like a programming club where we could teach other students how to program. The problem was I had no idea how to program, so this is completely theoretical.
Yeah,
But my friend could, so he taught me some basic Python and mainly HTML and JavaScript. And at that point, I really started like spending all my time writing like little web things. So I wrote a website for this club, and at some point, I found out about GitHub, and I got into like open source things. At first, just looking into issues and like filing issues, triaging issues,
yeah,
and at some point, a little while later, I stumbled over on no, I stumbled across the Dino project, which Ryan
yeah,
had just announced. I don't know, probably half a year before I found out about it,
yeah,
and that seemed very interesting to me because I had up to that point always used Node for server side JavaScript,
yeah,
and yeah, because like what else is there, right? You could write like a
yeah.
Java Graal VM Java thing, but like nobody does that, so.
No, no, no.
And Node was really like you were really feeling the age at this point already. Like on the front end, we had promises and like ES modules at that point. And Node was 2 years ago. There was not even like we didn't even think about ES modules in Node yet. Like
Yeah,
Node 12 did not have great module support. So yeah, Dino did all of that better, and I wanted to be part of that. So I started by just writing JavaScript. A lot of Dino is actually built in JavaScript, so it's a JavaScript runtime that's obviously not all of it is built in JavaScript. A
yeah.
bunch is built in Rust, but I started with JavaScript and progressively learned Rust and contributed more of my time while I was at high school. And then the coronavirus pandemic hit, and
Yeah,
school essentially stopped. So yeah, I
yeah.
had a lot more free time on my hands to contribute.
That's interesting. So you're still quite young then.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
that's
19.
okay. That's super exciting. I mean, getting into it that early on. I mean, yeah, it's impressive. I must say, it's kind of a yeah something to look up to. Well, hopefully it goes well. I mean, especially getting free time on your hands now, you have way more time to play around with these things. That's
Yeah.
awesome. One thing I was going to ask because every time I talk to anyone about Deno, no one knows how to pronounce it correctly. And since you've said it now about 6 times, I guess it's my name with an O at the end. So that's easy enough for me to remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So you said you've been working on it since, well, a year now? How long have you actually been contributing?
Well, Full time, I've been working on it. Full time paid, I've been working on it for about a year now. And before that, probably around like 1.5 or maybe or 1.5 years of just open source contributions.
Impressive. Nice. It's right from the start, right? So you're getting to see this thing actually like explode. That's very, very cool. So you say you've been working on it paid now for about a year. What does that entail? Because open source, I think a lot of us are familiar with kind of finding issues and helping out where we can. What's the difference between that and working on it as a paid employee, I guess?
The nice thing is that you like regular when you've open source, there's no expectation of anything ever getting done, right?
Yeah.
Or at least there shouldn't be. People still expect it, and that's sort of where open source maintainer burnout comes from. But the nice thing with paid employees is that like there's a team of people and they're always there, and you can talk to them and you can spread issues between each other, and everybody can work on the things that they're most familiar with. Without having like the bad feeling of, oh, am I stealing this person's free time even more than like I already am.
Sure. No, cool. That's pretty exciting. I mean, yeah, the entire concept is pretty exciting. I think there is a question further on. I have a few that we've been thinking about, but one of them is basically the ecosystem of it. And I think before that, I'm not going to skip all the questions, but basically, maybe you can tell me before I describe my understanding, but what is it? Is it similar to what the JVM is to something like JavaScript and Kotlin, or how do you see it? What is Deno?
So Deno builds on the same JavaScript virtual machine that Node does, which is V8. That's the virtual machine that powers Chrome and a whole bunch of Electron. But there's V8 is very low level, right? It's a very, very big C++ project, and having in-depth familiarity with it is incredibly difficult. There's only very few people on Earth which have like in-depth familiarity with the V8 API. And the Dino project sort of consists of multiple layers. Like we have one part of the project, which is the Deno Core, which has nothing to do with the runtime itself per se. It just wraps up the V8 C API in something that can be easily digested by people that haven't spent the last 10 years working on V8, right? So we expose very simple wrapper functions to call in and out of JavaScript into the native language. We provide an easy way for you to load ES modules to execute JavaScript. And then on top of that, we have modules which implement, for example, the fetch API or I don't know, any other things that like events, DOM events, things like that. And this Deno CLI is sort of take all of these extensions and the runtime in V8 and compile them into a single binary, and then add a formatter and a linter and a test framework on top of that, and compile all that together. And that's essentially what the CLI is. But the Deno project is a lot more than just the CLI. It's a very layered approach, which is very modular and can be like easily plugged together to create other things.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, there are a few questions that I was thinking of, and I'm reading through this now. I'm thinking, so you basically say it's multi-layered, but it's also built on the V8 engine. So why would I use Deno instead of Node? You said previously that it was a little bit outdated. Node was outdated in terms of modules. What's the selling point, basically?
Yeah. So if you look at Node now, the majority of the modules that are published to NPM Node's package manager are common script, right? And require all of these legacy things. They've all been superseded by things like ES modules, or if you import the file system, the file system standard library in Node, and you want to read a file asynchronously, you don't get back a promise. You provide a callback, and then you have these endless trees of callback chains instead of being able to use async await. So what Deno sort of does is it gets rid of all of this old bloat, and instead it starts fresh. It starts from what the browser provides today, which is promises, async await, ES modules, and like every fetch, for example, we don't have a like HTTP thing which you pull in to make GET requests. You just call fetch, and it's exactly the same in the browser. And our aim is that code that you run in the browser can also run in Dino and vice versa. Like Dino is essentially a browser without the HTML. Like it's a browser that doesn't have the DOM, but everything else is meant to be as similar as possible. And we do provide some things which the browser doesn't have, like direct access to file system or TCP sockets or things like that. But yeah, generally anything you can use Node for, you can use Dino for too.
And the difference between direct file access is what? Do you now need permissions? Do you require permissions when running Dino versus Node, where you can just do that low level?
Right. Yeah. So that's another thing that we have in Node and many other server-side runtimes. You have the concept of you start this program and this program has ultimate trust. So anything, this program can do anything on your computer. It can read your EDC password file. It can delete your entire file system. It can do anything. Yeah. And the browser can't do that. V8 is an incredibly great sandbox, right? It's this sandbox like protects millions or billions of people every day from the scary web. So Node completely gets rid of this entire sandbox. Like the sandbox is completely useless in Node because you have full access to everything. But in the browser, you still want to have access to these privileged APIs. Like you still want to be able to drag and drop a file from your desktop to a website without being able to, without the file or without the website having full access to your desktop.
Yeah.
And so Dino sort of does a similar thing. It by default doesn't give you access to anything on your system, and instead you have to explicitly give it permission to like open network sockets or read files from a folder or write files to a folder, read environment variables. Like all these things, they're you need to give us permission first.
Further question, just for my understanding, how do you request these permissions? Is there something? What's the process of actually requesting permissions from a user?
Yeah. So there's two ways. You can either specify permissions up front. So you call Dino run and you specify some flags. So for example, allow read, and that'll give you access to the entire file system, or allow read with a specific folder and it'll only give you access to that folder. And there's flags, all kinds of flags. Or the other option is, I don't know if you know this browser API, navigator.permissions. You can do query permission, or I don't remember what the exact API is, but you can query the user at runtime. Okay. And Dino has the same thing. So you can query at runtime, then you'll get a prompt in your terminal, and you can say yes, no, if you want to grant access.
Cool. It's it really takes what we know. I think everyone is very comfortable with Node at this point. You just install Node and do whatever you want on your file system. As you said, you can RMRF anything. I think
what most people aren't familiar with is, sorry to interrupt, but what most people aren't familiar with is that, like, if you npm install something, that before you even run your script, that npm install has full access to your entire system. Like it can do anything. It can run arbitrary scripts. It can run arbitrary binaries. It can do anything. Like just an npm install, which is crazy. Like how we allowed this for 10 years.
Well, I think that's what I think there's a library called Sneak, SNYK. I think Git has implemented it now, GitHub. And I think that's what they were trying to solve. But I mean, you can't just patch something on top of something else and expect it to be a fix, right? Adding more layers, like security and not in obscurity, something like that.
Yeah. Like you need to, if you wanted to have great security, you need to start with that mindset of great security. Yeah. And if you have a virtual machine which you punch a bunch of holes into and then try to patch them later, you're always going to have some holes left somewhere.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think a lot of people, once they see this, or at least people that are learning JavaScript and Dino now, I guess, instead of Node, I would just call it Node. But a lot of people that are learning server-side JavaScript, getting into this, I think they'll start realizing, oh shit, like for us generally, I don't even think about that stuff anymore. I just kind of put it in a server and cool.
It gets incredibly crazy that we haven't all been hit by some crazy supply chain attack yet, where, I don't know, React, somebody in the added some malicious script to the React library, and then suddenly everybody's CI credentials were leaked. I don't know. It's totally possible, right?
There's been a couple of instances where, for instance, open source projects have kind of had internal meltdowns, and it is kind of surprising that no one's just put in something malicious when they've left the project. It's a lot of trust, especially with open source. But
yeah.
That's
and like you're not just trusting the person that the package is from that you're importing, because that package has 10 dependencies, and each of those have 10 other dependencies.
Yeah.
So just by trusting a single person, you've already actually trusted 1,000 people. Because
I remember, I think it was in 2015. There was a library for importing. I think it was, I don't remember the exact name. It was a file access, but it was the incorrect library, but everyone was importing it because it looked similar to the correct one. And they just took that off NPM, and like millions, or not millions, but probably like 100,000 projects just wouldn't NPM install anymore. It was wild. We actually went through the same thing. Talking about dependencies, how do you manage dependencies in Deno?
Yeah, so Dino actually manages dependencies the exact same way that browsers do. So in the browser, if you create an ES module and you import that ES module, you can just import modules from anywhere on the web. You specify URL and you import that. So you could import from Unpackage or from, I don't know, Skypack, JSPM.dev, Cloudflare's JavaScript CDN, like anything, your own web server. And like what we do is the first time we encounter a remote file, we'll download it and cache it on disk, and it will immutably cache it. So it'll never change once you've downloaded it. And like if you want to do versioning, you just put the version in the URL, right? You can say, I want React at version 16, right in the URL.
And it sounds less safe because you're pulling anything from anywhere, but as you said already, security is already built into Deno, so you will have to actually request permissions before it just maliciously executes anything. That's really nice. Okay.
And what you have to consider is that like Node sort of does the same thing. This npm install, it looks like it's secure, or I'm not going to say the npm people aren't great at securing their servers, but like ultimately you're still pulling a zip file. In npm's case, a zip file from npmjs.org. So like if that server is hacked, it's the exact same problem as like if Cloudflare CDN is hacked.
Sure.
And the nice thing with distribution like this is that if Cloudflare CDN is hacked, only the people that actually import from there are affected, and not everybody.
Let's be honest, the likelihood is very low, but
exactly.
It's still there. It's still there.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of, so in Node, I know I'm relating a lot of this to Node and asking you questions. I'm not trying to beat on Node at all, but it seems like the only logical thing to compare it to, right? So in Node, you have dev dependencies and dependencies. How do you manage things like that in Deno if everything is being imported directly?
You really don't. You have multiple entry points, for example. So you can have one entry point for your testing and one entry point for your regular script, or for your main entry point. And those can have separate imports in them, right? So like there's this whole thing nowadays with infrastructure as code and like dependencies as code, where everybody wants to specify everything as code now. And this is like the ultimate as code. You're specifying your code's dependencies in that code, which is like exactly what Go pioneered 10 years ago. We're doing the exact same thing.
So you should only really be using the dependency if you're using the code, basically. Yeah. Cool. No, that's pretty exciting. So, sorry, I feel like I'm just going down a rabbit hole here of each question seems to lead into the next one. Because, so in terms of dependencies, like dev dependencies and stuff, how do you manage like the ecosystem around Deno? Can you import anything that you could be running on Node within Deno? Those packages, you said they were outdated using different imports because it's not ES modules. Do those work?
Yeah. There's some great services like Skypack is one of them. It's by the people that built what's it called? Snowpack.
Yeah,
Snowpack.
I know what you're talking about.
I think Snowpack. Yeah. Skypack is awesome. JSPM is awesome. What they do is they take common JS modules and they transpile them to ESM. And those you can just import most Node modules from there. The ones that you can't are the ones that specifically rely on node specific things. So specific node file system APIs, for example, they don't work in Dino because Dino isn't Node, right? Like we don't have the Node file system APIs. But anything else, like anything that works in the browser, will likely work in Dino too, if it's not using APIs which Dino doesn't support.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit scary, right? Because you're rebuilding everything from scratch, and now you're kind of, there's already this massive ecosystem, and everyone is super comfy in Node. How do you deal with that? How are you going to manage to get people to, for instance, you said anything that runs in the browser. So what about things like, let's say you're doing like, I can't think of anything, for example, off the top of my head, but something like Express, sure, that works in the browser. But if you're doing like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. If you're doing something server-side that you can't do in the browser, that is, for instance, a massive library that everyone is using currently, how are you going to try and kind of win people over to move over to Deno instead of Node?
The thing is that most libraries, like there's a comparatively small amount of libraries which actually rely on Node APIs. It's like, especially if you're working in front end. If you're working in back end, there's obviously a bunch, but
sure, yeah.
In front end, most libraries are built to be loaded in the browser. So they work natively. And for the libraries that aren't, there's usually either already replacements built by other people, or the maintainers of the original Node libraries are making their libraries Dino compatible. And the other thing we have is we have a standard library, and the standard library has a Node compatibility layer in it. So okay. We actually have a compatibility layer that you can, it's like, I don't know, 30% done or something, but okay. it can be used to run some Node stuff in Dino.
Okay, so there is some comfort there coming from, you said it's 30% done. Is there a roadmap for that, or is it just something people should look forward to?
Well, yeah, it really just depends. There's some APIs which like the file system APIs, for example, they're pretty much 100% done. But stuff like HTTP, those haven't really, they don't really work at all right now. There's no HTTP APIs, but yeah, a bunch of the APIs that you get in Node are already supported. And there's a roadmap on, I don't know the exact issue number, but there's an issue with the roadmap.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's I'll ask you a couple of questions about that later, because I think a lot of this stuff is pretty exciting, especially because I think everyone here that is joining in today is a front-end developer. So I'm pretty sure everyone here is pretty much at least interested in what's happening, because it's pretty massive. So we can get into that later and how everyone can contribute. Yeah, in terms of it, let me slow down for 1 second. I'm getting excited, sorry. In terms of adoption, because you said there's a compatibility layer coming in the future, do you guys already have statistics for metrics, for the current adoption rates and how many people are actually using Deno at the moment?
I don't have anything off the top of my head now, but I can give you some Deno like repository like numbers about like contributors and stuff. So we have like 600, we just crossed 600 contributors, and we have like 520 open issues and I don't know, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 closed issues. I think we're at PR, like the latest PR number is like 10,000 something or other. So like there's a bunch of stuff happening, and we do releases every week, and every 4 weeks we do a minor release, which usually has new features or usually has new features.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine it's still kind of early on, you guys still have to tackle a lot. So it's exciting, honestly. I think if you're someone who enjoys new stuff, new shiny toys to play with, I think this is definitely something that you should get involved in.
Especially if you know browser APIs. Like if you know how to use Fetch, the WebSocket API is 100% compatible between Dino and the browser. So if you know browser APIs, you're gonna feel right at home.
Yeah, I think the reason I personally got into using Node, I think it was on version 0.08 or 0.10, something like that. It was really low. The reason I got into this was because I really enjoy hacking small web servers together, like just basically just messing around and really just trying trying to break things. I'll put it that way. So I think this is a good time to get onto it and kind of
like if you like opening bug reports, man, this is prime real estate for you.
Yeah, I'm really good at breaking things. Not so good at fixing them. No, that's a joke. That's a joke. But yeah, I'm really good at breaking things. So I'll take a look at it. It sounds really good. In terms of, so you said it's like you just crossed 600 contributors and 500 issues. So
there's 500 active issues. Okay. Like those are the ones that are currently open. But yeah,
sure. So it sounds like there is a lot of people contributing, and I don't think, obviously, it's not really a race. I wouldn't say you're building something new. You're not expecting it to be exactly the same as Node. But how are you guys expecting to kind of, let me not sound like a business person, but take over the market share is not a good way to put it. How are you guys feeling like you should or could catch up or eventually become more relevant in the market than currently? Maybe that's a rude way to put it.
No. I completely understand what you mean. I think ultimately the thing is that Node is never going to die. Like just like Java is never, well, okay, Java may be a bad example, but I don't know, like Visual Basic is never going to die, even though Visual Basic is terrible and nobody's going to write new stuff, or I don't know, but very few people write new stuff in Visual Basic, but it's still never going to die. But I think the people are very happy with having APIs that are compatible across all their runtimes. And that's really a great driving factor for people to try out Dino, and a lot of people are really enjoying it. So I don't know. We'll see how it is in 2 years. But I think we're going to get a significant amount of market share. But yeah, Node's never going to die.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying. As I mentioned earlier, it's kind of similar to how the JVM is, and everything is kind of jumping on that now. And people know Java exists, but it's just developers like new shiny toys, right? Yeah. So sure, I might be a really, really good Java developer, but I've been doing it for 15 years. Let me check out something else and still be able to use the JVM. It's kind of the same thing, right? You're a Node developer, you might as well take a look. So I think it'll be quite a lot of interest, or it is already anyway. But
it's sort of, if you compare this to the JVM, you have Java and Kotlin, right? And Kotlin's like the new great thing that's running on the JVM. And you could sort of compare Node and Dino in this. Like Dino runs TypeScript out of the box. I don't know if I've mentioned that, but you can run, okay, well, now I've mentioned it. You can run TypeScript out of the box. So you can import remote TypeScript files as well, which is sort of like this level up the language and have users, have it be nicer for users to use, have a better ecosystem, better. We've learned a lot of things from Node, and
of course, 3
of our primary contributors, Bert Belder and Ryan Dahl. Like Ryan Dahl wrote Node originally, and Bert Belder and Ben Nordhaus, they wrote libuv, which is the thing that backs Node, the thing that interacts with the system. So they have a lot of experience with designing like Node and all the mistakes they made there. So
you learn
a lot of experience to fix them now.
It's really exciting. I think, as you said, it kind of levels up the language, right? You already know them. I wouldn't call them mistakes, but you know the things that you kind of wish you didn't do when you were building something, and every time you do it gets slightly better, right? It's the same as any project you work on.
Exactly.
Cool, man.
And like it's just really difficult to write like big new runtimes. So like you only get these every 10 years or every 20 or.
Yeah, there's always like a couple of guys I say guys broadly, a couple of people sitting in a room kind of looking at a screen going, maybe we should build a new runtime. Like, most of us are not going to be doing that.
If you compare this with the iteration rate of like front-end frameworks, you get a new one every 2 days, every 2 weeks, every very often. Or just like browsers in general, how fast they iterate.
Yeah, and it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, actually. Yeah. So, I'm trying to remember what I actually. Oh, I was talking about catching up with Node. Oh. Yeah, I'm thinking about all these new front-end frameworks I got to learn for next week. You already talked about, I think I've covered this actually, because you've already spoken about the compatibility layer eventually and the imports. But what other issues, like, so say I'm a developer wanting to change from Node to Dino. I keep saying it wrong, to Dino.
It's the new
It's
GIF.
my,
I mean,
it's
GIF.
my, it's my own name and I'm getting it wrong, so it's kind of awkward. So say I'm a new developer to Dino and I want to switch from a Node project. Is there like a migration path, or what issues will I run into, basically?
Yeah, so you should, if I'd recommend that if you are that you don't try to, or you can obviously try to migrate a Node project, but in most cases, the better path is not migration, but write something new in Dino. Write some tooling script, like something in your repository that does some CI task or something, just to get familiar with how the runtime works. And then, like with this new whole modern micro frameworks and micro whatever everything, right? It's you can start porting over individual services. But if you have one big monolithic node service, you can obviously port it over to Dino, but there's no golden path for you right now.
Okay.
You're gonna run into issues, and you're gonna run into things that you're gonna have to adapt.
Yeah.
It's like migrating something from Java to Kotlin. It's going to be a big project.
Slow and painful. Well, I mean, you should probably recommend it to people so that you can get a lot more bug reports and fix stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
No,
we already get enough of those from like people just starting out. So no, it's the bug reports. They're not. There's not that many anymore.
That's good.
It's getting a lot more stable.
Yeah. Slowly over the years, the maturity will increase. And
yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna slowly move on to, I think, user questions, because I think I don't know how much time we actually have. I was just talking. Sorry, I get carried away sometimes. But you already mentioned the roadmap, right? Do you have any ideas of new upcoming things that people should be excited about, or basically what's upcoming for us?
I can tell you what I'm working on right now. So in
can you, or
3 weeks? No. It's all public, all open source, right?
Yeah, true.
You can see what we're doing. But one thing I've been working on is better support for web workers. So I don't know if you've used web workers on the web. We support them too, and and on the web you can pass message channels and array buffers and objects between workers. And I've been improving compatibility there. So in the future release, you'll be able to, I don't know, do more things with workers. Completely, that's probably exciting. Very boring for many people, but
I don't. It doesn't seem like something that I'll quickly go and try out when it's released. So, sure, but it's cool to hear. It's cool to hear.
Yeah, and there's other things too. Like we're continually adding new web APIs. I think one that again, like the thing is, we already have so many web APIs. The ones we're adding now are like, most people probably find them boring. These are the ones that are at the bottom of the priority list. But one that's relatively high is more cryptography APIs. Web crypto. There's a crypto, like the crypto global. We already have a lot there, but there's still a lot missing too, which we're working on.
Cool. So it seems a little bit scary for people trying to build crypto bots, but I won't get into that. Yeah, so what I was going to say earlier, how can people contribute? What's the easiest way to start?
Yeah, so the Dino project, as I said, is split across multiple parts and multiple repositories. And probably the easiest to get started with for most people is the standard library. The standard library is sort of everything that doesn't directly interact with the native system, but sort of utility functions. And things that in Node you would usually import a module for. So for example, we have something in the standard library for you to print out colors to the terminal. Like in Node, you'd have to pull in a library to do that. And that's all written in TypeScript, and it is tested and run and built like any other Dino runtime or Dino library. And it's pretty easy to get started with. We have open issues there for things to look into. And if you know Rust, or want to learn Rust, you can also obviously try work on things in the CLI. We have issues there, and we have good first issue labels on issues that are good to get started with.
Cool. It sounds kind of nice, actually. It's almost, it's a good, I think learning along with a project like this is a really good way to get started with a language, as well as being a core contributor eventually. I think it's really cool. There's another question about requests for changes, RFCs, and discussions, and basically, I don't really like asking this because I think generally you should start looking into the code and stuff first. But if you have some requests for changes, or you would like to have a discussion about something, do you guys have a Discord, or what's the easiest way to get in contact?
So we have Discord, discord.gg/Dino. You can join there, and there's always somebody active. We have like 9,000 active, or 9,000 people there. And like the core team is spread all across the world, so somebody's always awake to talk to you, which is great. And other than that, we have GitHub discussions if you want to have a more formal or a more like not formal, more structured discussion. And if you search for RFC there, you'll see some of the RFCs we've recently created for things like a new test runner or new features for a test runner.
Cool.
You can like see how that looks and write something similar. And if you have a bug report, just file it as a bug.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, I think Discord, for me at least, is one of the easiest ways to interact with the community these days. Okay, I'm going to switch over to user questions. I think we have a few. I've tried not to run out of time, but I think there's a lot to share, right? It's not a small project. But I think I don't see the questions, so I'm maybe, there, it pops up. Exciting. Okay. So Bart says, hey, Luca, I've played around with Dino, but never got to use it for bigger projects or in a professional setting because of the lack of mature packages available. How do you see this changing in the short term? I know there's ongoing work on polyfilling node STDs, standard libraries, I guess, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think it's getting a lot more mature every day. A lot more packages are being ported. We have, I'd say, a pretty stable Postgres library if you're writing like server-side things. We have a great HTTP server called Oak, which is sort of like Express, but then for Dino, and I don't know, I think it's better, but everybody there are their own. I think it's really getting better every day in every release. So just like if something's missing right now and you don't feel like building it, then just wait a couple months and it'll probably be there.
And as you just said,
and if you don't find something right away, hop on Discord and ask. It's often some stuff's just hidden away somewhere. And
I was about to say, I mean, if you need help or would like to start a discussion, just Discord, literally direct messages with the contributors. It's awesome. And also, I think you said, I mean, they were talking about node libraries, but as you said, you can actually convert things on, what do you call it?
Like Skypack and JSPM.
Yeah, Skypack. That. So that's available as well, I guess. And then a question.
And you'd actually be surprised like how much stuff works there.
I've never actually tried. I mean, the only time I've ever bothered with actually doing something like that, or for like transpilation, I guess you would call it, would be the Babel REPL, which is just to check that things are actually working well. Just to change topic. Jurgen's asked, Dino mentioned that among other things, Dino is a great replacement for utility scripts that may have been historically written with Bash or Python. Is that the main focus, or will use Dino next year for authoring for the browser? I'm not sure I completely understand that.
Yeah, no, I think I get the gist. Dino's a general purpose runtime, right? It's not specifically built for front-end development or specifically built for tooling scripts, but it's great for all of these, especially for a tooling script. If you want to write a tooling script with Node, you have to create a package.json file. You have to have a node modules folder and a package log file.
Yeah.
So that's at least 4 files, or well, 3 files plus a multi-gigabyte folder.
Yeah.
Like the node modules black hole of whatever. And in Dino, you just have a single file, and you import right from a URL, and we'll handle all the caching and everything in the background.
So yeah, sorry, continue. I'll ask this question afterwards.
Yeah. So yeah, for tooling scripts like this, it's single file, just like Python. And if you're writing full-fledged web servers, you can separate out your dependencies into separate files and have a more centralized approach, or a more organized approach, maybe, to how you deal with things. But I think it scales up pretty well.
Cool. I mean, that's probably the first way I would play around with it is probably writing small scripts and just seeing how everything interacts and works. So yeah, probably the best way to start. Jürgen asked again, well, further, I guess he's kind of digging into a bit of an omega question here. He said, how can we start using Dino packages in our day-to-day work? Everything we use, for example, create React app, are not node-based.
Yeah,
are node-based, sorry.
Yeah. You could, for example, just start out with other things that Dino provides. Dino's not just a runtime. It also provides built-in JavaScript formatter, like Prettier, but it's a lot faster than Prettier. We have a linter, which is like 2 magnitudes faster than ESLint. That's like if something would take 10 seconds in ESLint, it's going to take 100 milliseconds in DinoLint, but with the same rule set. So if you would just want to get the Dino binary in your pipeline, to get your colleagues aware of it, for example, then that's a great way to start. Just it improves everybody's day-to-day work. You're speeding everything up. And and the other thing that you can do is write tooling scripts, right? Like CI scripts. You have a script to publish to npm, or a script to deploy some VM on DigitalOcean or something like that. If you had previously written that in Bash, maybe you could try port that to Dino.
Yeah, I think Jürgen is kind of aiming as having it as a replacement for everything he's doing, which I think it's probably not ready for that yet, right? It's not.
Well, you definitely can have it as a replacement for everything. Like we have some projects internally which, like, Dino is the okay, we're the core team, but where we don't use Node and we don't use Python or anything. Like Dino handles everything, and I think it's actually very, very capable of that right now. The thing is, you have to put in a little more effort from the get-go, in the beginning, to find the right packages, just because there hasn't been 10 years of NPM yet.
Yeah, you can't expect that from a young project right away.
Right.
Can I say young, or should I say immature? I don't know what the correct terminology
is.
But
I think young's good. Young's good.
Yeah, immature sounds a little. Yeah. So something you mentioned, there are 2 slight things here. You mentioned no node modules. How do you manage all the dependencies and packages? You said you handle caching.
Yeah. So there's a folder. There's a folder on disk somewhere in a what we call the Dino dir, which is like the Dino cache directory. Like in Chrome, for example, the Chrome has a directory where it stores your local storage and your IndexedDB and all of that. We have the same thing, and we cache all your stuff in there.
Okay, cool. And you don't have to manage that. You don't have to worry about that. It just handles itself.
It just happens. Like, yeah.
So you're not going to run into an issue where you now need to delete your node modules folder again and restart because of some issue. Cool. That's nice to know. Another question, something you said while you were talking, and I think something all of us here know if we've taken a small look into it, is you guys use Rust quite a bit. Why? What is that Rust layer for?
Yeah, so Rust is sort of like a modern replacement for C++ or C. It's fully sound, so it's the compiler guarantees that you don't have memory bugs, which many issues in Node and OpenSSL and Chrome are related to out-of-bound reads and writes of memory, and those can be very, very critical for security. And Rust completely prevents all of this if you're using it correctly. Yeah, like if you don't specifically say unsafe, then it's going to be completely memory safe, which we don't. It's completely memory safe. Yeah, that's the primary thing, and it also has a way better build system compared to C or C++.
Cool. We have a few other user questions, and I think this is because Bart's probably been using it and has been wondering, is there any progress on the Google Cloud SDK for Dino? He said he would ask in Discord, but you're here now, so.
I have no idea. I do know of somebody that actually does run some Dino stuff on GCP. So maybe, but I would have to get back to you on that. Just hit me up on Discord and I'll try to find it.
Okay, cool. So you're gonna have to ask on Discord anyway, Bart. Sorry.
Yeah.
Luke's asking, can you cache the dependencies up front so it doesn't have to download them on the first run?
Yes,
okay.
You can. So there's a Dino cache command, which you just specify your cache or your file, and essentially it'll load all of the modules. It'll download all the modules, but it won't actually execute them. So it'll do everything up to the execution, and then it'll stop.
Okay, that's quite nice. So like if you're putting everything in like a Docker, that would be quite nice.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Yeah. Copy everything over, called Dino cache, and then.
Awesome. Okay. Short, sweet answer. Exactly what you were looking for, I guess, Luke. Yeah, are there any other questions? I think we might be running out of time. I'm not too sure. I don't know how long you were supposed to be here, but I think, well, you're here forever now. Would you like to join?
Stuck here.
This was actually an interview the whole time.
That was great. I enjoyed it.
No, I'm glad. It was nice to talk to you. I think it sounds like a pretty exciting project. I'm probably going to hop on the Discord as well, see where I can help. I think, I don't know, this kind of stuff, I always enjoyed scripting, even though it's something that I never really spent too much time doing, at least not in the last 7 years. I'm getting old. But yeah, no, it was really interesting to hear about Dino and how to pronounce it. It's probably my favorite part so far. So yeah, if anyone needs to get in contact with you, you said they can do that through Discord.
Yeah.
If they have any questions. Or...
Alternatively, if you want to hit me up personally, then you can also message me on Twitter.
And you're based in the Netherlands, so
yeah. Or you can come visit me. No, don't do that.
But, don't worry, we don't have your IP address. You're safe.
Okay. I don't know.
Okay. Well, thanks. Really appreciate it. I'm just gonna quickly tell everyone that's here that we basically have the next Guru Talk coming up in a month. So, Lucas, since you're here, you're welcome to join as well. The thing is, we're now opening up these Guru Days for your grandmother, your family, your best friend, anyone who would like to join and listen in on this. Listen to. I'm not exactly sure who's next week. Oh, yes, I am. I'm lying. We're actually having a pub quiz, which will be hosted, not held. I don't think Randy's going to hold all of us. It's going to be hosted by Randy. So I think everyone here is probably aware of Randy, except maybe Luca. He's one of the leaders, managers for one of the teams. And then after that, we're going to have a talk on authentication for JavaScript developers, hosted by Nick Hazemans. I don't know Nick personally, but it should be pretty interesting. I'm always into authentication stuff and security. And then lastly, we're going to have a talk on end-to-end testing for real-time web chat applications. And that's going to be done by Gleb Baumutov, and from what I understand, he was actually on the team for, now I've forgotten, testing framework for the browser, maybe Cypress. See, I'm getting a whole lot of feedback. That's great. Thanks, guys. He was actually on the Cypress team for a while, so that should be pretty interesting. And I assume the end-to-end testing will be done in Cypress as well. So if you guys are interested in that, I see Cypress popping up a lot these days, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Sorry, I talk a lot. Got to try and say as much as I can in a short amount of time. I think that was your job, actually. Cool, no problem. Hope you have a great day.